Ryan stared across the room, trying to make sense of the words that had just come out of Emma's mouth. "I don't owe you intimacy," she had said, her tone calm but cold, as if she were discussing the weather. For a moment he thought he'd misheard her. Surely, this couldn't be the same woman he had shared 6 years of marriage with. The woman who used to laugh at his jokes, hold his hand during late-night movies, and whisper promises of forever. The silence stretched between them, heavy and suffocating. Ryan's mind raced, replaying her words over and over. "How did we get here?" he thought. He felt a wave of emotions crashing down. Hurt, confusion, and a deep sense of betrayal. Their relationship had once been filled with passion and connection, but somewhere along the way, that fire had burned out. Now, he was left with a stranger who saw no problem in dismissing his need for closeness. "Emma," he finally managed, his voice shaky, "this isn't just about intimacy. It's about connection. Don't you care about that anymore?" Emma sighed, looking at him like he was being unreasonable. "Ryan, stop overthinking everything. We're fine. Marriage isn't just about sex, you know." Her indifference cut deeper than her words. Ryan had always been willing to fight for their relationship, to go above and beyond to make things work. But now, for the first time, he wondered if he was the only one who cared. If she could so easily dismiss his feelings, what did that say about the life they had built together? As the conversation ended and Emma walked out of the room, Ryan sat alone, a growing realization dawning on him. This wasn't just a rough patch. This was a turning point, and it was time for him to decide whether he was willing to keep fighting for someone who had already given up. Ryan often found himself reminiscing about the early days of their relationship. Back then, Emma was a whirlwind of energy, a spark that lit up every room she walked into. They were inseparable, stealing moments between busy days to share laughter, plan adventures, or simply sit quietly, lost in their own world. Ryan cherished those days when every glance carried meaning, and every touch felt electric. Their wedding had been a dream, a celebration of love that seemed unshakable. For the first few years, life was as blissful as they had imagined. They would cook together, share inside jokes, and spend long nights talking about their future, traveling the world, building a home, and someday raising a family. But somewhere along the way, things began to change. At first, the signs were subtle. Emma's laughter didn't come as easily, and her smiles became fewer and farther between. Ryan noticed she spent more time glued to her phone or engrossed in her work than in their conversations. The small gestures that once defined their relationship, holding hands during a walk, stealing a kiss in the kitchen, gradually disappeared. Ryan tried to brush it off as a phase. Every marriage has ups and downs, he told himself. But as months turned into years, Emma's distance grew more noticeable. She began deflecting his attempts at affection, offering excuses like exhaustion or stress. Date nights were met with half-hearted participation, her attention seemingly elsewhere. Still, Ryan refused to give up. He poured his energy into reviving their connection, planning romantic evenings and surprise getaways. When Emma brushed those off as unnecessary, he shifted his focus to acts of service, cooking her favorite meals, taking over household chores, and even folding laundry, which he detested. His love language became a language of desperation, hoping that by showing how much he cared, she might reciprocate. But Emma didn't. Conversations about their struggles led nowhere. When Ryan suggested they see a therapist, Emma laughed, dismissing the idea as pointless. "Therapy isn't going to make me want you more," she said, the sharpness of her words cutting deeper than she realized, or maybe deeper than she cared. Despite her dismissal, Ryan booked a session anyway, hopeful that she might change her mind. But Emma didn't show any interest. "Why can't you just accept that this is how I am now?" she had said with a sigh, as though she were explaining an unchangeable fact. For Ryan, that was the moment something shifted. It wasn't just the absence of intimacy that hurt. It was the lack of effort, the refusal to even try. It was the realization that he was fighting alone for a marriage that used to feel like a partnership. One night, as they sat in silence on opposite ends of the couch, Ryan looked over at Emma and barely recognized the woman he had fallen in love with. She was there, physically but emotionally, she was a million miles away. And worse, she seemed fine with it. The connection they once shared had been replaced by a cold indifference that made Ryan feel like an afterthought in his own marriage. Emma's indifference wasn't just passive, it was selfish. She seemed content with the idea of having Ryan as a stable presence, someone to share financial burdens and household responsibilities, but little else. Her dismissive attitude became more evident in her responses to his feelings. Whenever Ryan opened up about his loneliness, she would wave it off, saying, "You're overthinking," or "We're fine," but they weren't fine. And Emma's shocking statement, "I don't owe you intimacy," solidified what Ryan had begun to suspect for a long time. The marriage he was holding onto so tightly was already broken. For years, Ryan had convinced himself that love meant persevering, pushing through the hard times. But as Emma's disinterest turned into outright rejection, Ryan began to wonder if love also meant knowing when to walk away. The evening began innocently enough, with Ryan finishing a late dinner after a long day. Emma walked into the room with an uncharacteristic smile, the kind he hadn't seen in years. For a moment, he allowed himself to hope. Maybe she's finally ready to talk, to fix things. "Ryan," Emma said, sitting across from him with the air of someone about to present a grand idea. "I've been thinking, maybe we should start trying for kids." Ryan nearly choked on his water. He blinked at her, stunned. "Kids? Are you serious?" Emma nodded, her smile unwavering. "Yes, we're not getting any younger, and it's the logical next step for us as a couple." The words struck him as surreal. Logical? That was her reasoning? Ryan felt a sudden rush of disbelief and anger. His mind flashed back to the past year. A year filled with loneliness, emotional rejection, and constant reminders of how little Emma seemed to care about their marriage. "Emma," he said, his voice slow and deliberate, "we've been intimate twice this year. Twice. And now you want to bring a child into this." Her smile faltered, but she recovered quickly. "That's something we can work on," she replied casually, as if the problem could be solved with a few calendar reminders. "A child could help bring us closer." Ryan stared at her, trying to process what he was hearing. Closer? How could she be so blind to the reality of their relationship? To think that adding a child to their already fragile marriage would fix anything felt not just naive but cruel. He pushed back his chair and stood, shaking his head. "Emma, this isn't about kids. This is about us, and you've made it clear time and time again that you don't care about this marriage." Emma sighed, her tone shifting to irritation. "You're overreacting. I'm trying to build a future for us, and you're nitpicking." Ryan didn't argue further. He walked out of the room, retreating to their bedroom. Lying in bed that night, staring at the ceiling, he realized he couldn't keep doing this. Emma didn't want to fix their marriage. She wanted to maintain the status quo, where he provided stability while she gave nothing in return. The next morning, Ryan called a lawyer. By the end of the week, he had divorce papers in hand, ready to end the marriage that had become a source of pain rather than love. He handed them to Emma that Monday evening, his hands steady, his heart resolute. Emma stared at the papers, her face a mixture of shock and disbelief. "What is this?" she asked, her voice trembling. "It's a divorce petition," Ryan said flatly. "I've thought about this long and hard, and I think it's the best thing for both of us." For the first time in years, Emma looked genuinely caught off guard. "You're serious?" "Dead serious," he replied, his tone calm but firm. Her initial shock quickly turned to panic. Over the next few days, she cycled through every tactic she could think of to sway him. First came the seduction. One evening, she walked into their bedroom wearing lingerie he'd never seen before, leaning against the doorframe with an exaggerated pout. "Michael," she purred, her voice dripping with faux sincerity. "Maybe we can give this another shot." For a fleeting moment, Ryan hesitated. He wanted to believe her, but then reality hit him like a cold wave. Where was this effort for the past 2 years? Why does it take divorce papers for her to care? "Sorry, Emma," he said, stepping past her. "You're a little late." Her jaw dropped. "You're really going to throw this all away?" she demanded, anger creeping into her voice. "No," Ryan replied, meeting her gaze. "You already did." Next came the guilt trips. One morning, As Ryan packed his belongings, Emma sat on the couch, sobbing loudly. "You're abandoning me," she wailed. "I gave you the best years of my life." Ryan zipped his duffel bag, glancing at her with a mixture of sadness and resolve. "You gave me just enough to keep me around. Emma, let's not rewrite history." Her tears vanished instantly, replaced by a hardened glare. "Fine. Leave," she spat. "You'll regret this." And finally, there were the fake tears. Late one night, she cornered him in the hallway, her voice shaking as she whispered, "I miss the man you used to be, Ryan. I miss us." Ryan felt a pang of sadness, but it wasn't enough to undo the clarity he had gained. "No, Emma," he said quietly. "You miss having control over me." Her silence confirmed what he already knew. Emma didn't care about him or their marriage. She cared about what he represented. Security, stability, and a life she didn't have to work for. The realization solidified Ryan's decision. There was no going back. As he walked out the door for the final time, Ryan felt an unexpected sense of freedom. He wasn't leaving Emma behind, he was reclaiming himself. Ryan stood in the doorway of his sister's house, a duffel bag slung over his shoulder. It had been just 2 days since he walked out on Emma, leaving behind the home they had built together but no longer shared in spirit. His sister, Laura, welcomed him with open arms and a knowing smile. "Good to see you finally taking care of yourself," she said, giving him a tight hug. "You deserve better, Ryan." For the first time in months, Ryan felt a flicker of hope. The weight of his marriage's collapse still lingered, but being around family and away from the constant tension of Emma's indifference gave him the breathing room he desperately needed. Laura's home became Ryan's refuge as he began piecing his life back together. At first, the quiet felt unfamiliar, even unsettling. But he quickly realized how much he had neglected himself while trying to hold onto a failing marriage. He picked up his old hobbies, like woodworking, spending hours in Laura's garage crafting small projects. The rhythmic sanding of wood and the satisfaction of creating something tangible gave him a sense of control he hadn't felt in years. He also reconnected with old friends, meeting them for coffee or a casual game of basketball. For years, he had let these relationships slip, but now they became a lifeline, reminding him of the person he used to be. Ryan also returned to the gym, channeling his pent-up emotions into grueling workouts. With each mile on the treadmill and every weight lifted, he felt stronger, not just physically but emotionally. The small victories of self-improvement began to outweigh the bitterness of his past. But Emma wasn't ready to let go. The texts started within days of his departure. At first, they were simple and apologetic. "I miss you. Can we talk? Ryan, I know I messed up. Please come home. This isn't who we are." Ryan ignored them, following his lawyer's advice to limit communication. Besides, he knew better than to fall for her empty promises. Then the messages became more desperate. Emma sent long, emotional texts about how she couldn't live without him and how she wanted to fix everything. When those didn't get a response, she tried a different tactic. One evening, Ryan's phone buzzed with a picture message. He hesitated before opening it, unsure of what to expect. When he did, he couldn't help but laugh. Emma was dressed in lingerie, holding a bottle of champagne, with the caption, "Let's celebrate a fresh start." Ryan shook his head, deleting the photo without a second thought. Her sudden interest in seduction only confirmed what he already knew. Emma didn't miss him. She missed the control she had over him. When Laura saw the deleted photo in Ryan's trash folder, she burst out laughing. "Wow, she's pulling out all the stops, huh?" "Yeah," Ryan muttered, rolling his eyes. "She's persistent. I'll give her that." But her persistence didn't change his resolve. Ryan was done with the games and manipulation. A few weeks later, a friend from his hometown called with unexpected news. "Ryan," Mark said, his voice tinged with barely concealed amusement, "I just saw Emma's latest Instagram post." "You're not going to believe this." Ryan frowned. "What is it?" "She's already got a new boyfriend," Mark said. "Some guy named Jake. And let me tell you, he's something." Curiosity got the better of Ryan. He pulled up Emma's Instagram, which he hadn't looked at since leaving. Sure enough, There was a photo of her and Jake standing in front of the house Ryan had left behind. Jake was a scruffy-looking guy with a tank top that said, "Hustle hard," and tattoos that looked like they were drawn by a bored teenager. Ryan couldn't help but laugh. "Wow, she really upgraded," he said sarcastically. "That's not the best part," Mark added. Apparently, Jake's one of those entrepreneurs who sells cheap energy drinks out of his car. And guess what? He's been married twice already. Ryan leaned back, letting the news sink in. Emma's choice in partners wasn't his concern anymore. But Mark's next words hit differently. "Here's the kicker," Mark said. "Rumor has it Emma and Jake were hanging out before you two split up." Ryan's stomach churned. "What do you mean?" "Just what I said. I don't think he's a rebound." Sounds more like a during. The realization stung, but it wasn't entirely surprising. Looking back, the signs were there. The late nights Emma claimed were work events, the sudden interest in her appearance, and the way she guarded her phone like it contained state secrets. For a moment, Ryan felt the familiar pang of betrayal, but it didn't last long. Instead, he felt relief. Emma's infidelity wasn't a reflection of his worth. It was a reflection of her selfishness. "Thanks for letting me know, Mark," Ryan said, shaking off the sting. "Honestly, I feel bad for the guy. She's his problem now." And with that, Ryan closed the door on Emma's chapter of his life, determined to focus on his own future instead of her mistakes. One evening, Ryan decided to treat himself to a night out. After weeks of adjusting to his new life, he felt ready to step back into the world. He found himself at a small, bustling bar downtown, the kind of place where conversations flowed as easily as the craft beers on tap. As he scanned the menu, debating between a stout or something fruity, a woman slid onto the stool beside him. She had short auburn hair, a confident yet approachable smile, and a leather jacket that suggested she was effortlessly cool. "Trying to drink the whole menu?" she teased, glancing at the row of samplers in front of him. Ryan chuckled. "Just narrowing down my options. Got any recommendations?" She grinned. "Depends. Are you a hide the alcohol with fruit guy? Or do you actually like beer?" "Let's say I'm versatile," he replied, earning a laugh. Her name was Sophie, though she insisted he call her Sam. Their conversation flowed as naturally as the music playing softly in the background. They talked about everything from their favorite travel destinations to the absurdity of pineapple on pizza. She was firmly against it. Ryan played Switzerland. For the first time in a long while, Ryan felt seen. There were no mind games, no guarded words, just genuine connection. A couple of weeks later, Ryan and Sophie were sharing dinner at a cozy Italian restaurant. Over plates of pasta and wine, their light-hearted banter took a more personal turn. "So," Sophie began, swirling her wine, "what's your story? Any crazy exes?" Ryan hesitated before giving her the short version. "Married young, things fell apart, and now I'm figuring out life again." Sophie nodded, her expression thoughtful. "What about her? What was she like?" Ryan smirked, pulling out his phone. "You'll love this." He scrolled to a photo Mark had shown him of Emma and Jake, smiling awkwardly in front of Ryan's old house. He handed Sophie the phone. Her eyes widened as she stared at the image. Then, to Ryan's surprise, she laughed. A short, sharp sound filled with disbelief. "Wait a second," she said, handing the phone back. "I know this guy." Ryan's brow furrowed. "You do?" "Yeah," she replied, leaning back in her chair. "Jake used to hang out with some friends of mine. Total mooch. But here's the kicker. I saw them together months ago. Like, way before you mentioned your divorce." Ryan froze. "You're sure?" "Positive," Sophie said. "They were at a party holding hands." It didn't seem like a new thing. The revelation hit Ryan hard. He had long suspected Emma's relationship with Jake had begun before their marriage ended, but hearing confirmation from Sophie made it undeniable. For a moment, Ryan was silent, connecting the dots he hadn't wanted to see before. The late nights, Emma's sudden shifts in behavior, her guarded phone. It all made sense now. She hadn't just fallen out of love with him. She had betrayed him long before their marriage officially ended. Sophie reached across the table, touching his hand gently. "You okay?" Ryan exhaled slowly, a small, bittersweet smile forming. Yeah. Honestly, this just confirms what I already knew. I'm better off without her. As they left the restaurant, Ryan felt a newfound sense of clarity. Meeting Sophie and hearing her perspective only reinforced the emotional growth he had experienced since leaving Emma. For so long, he had blamed himself for the collapse of his marriage. But now, he understood that Emma's actions were a reflection of her own flaws, not his failures. Walking beside Sophie, he couldn't help but feel hopeful. For the first time in years, the future seemed full of possibility. Sitting in his apartment later that night, Ryan reflected on the journey that had brought him here. The man he was now felt worlds apart from the man he had been just months ago, trapped in a toxic marriage, blaming himself for Emma's indifference. Emma's betrayal no longer haunted him. It wasn't a reflection of his worth, but a testament to her inability to value a healthy relationship. In the end, her choices freed him from a life of settling for less than he deserved. Meeting Sophie felt like the start of something new, something honest and real. It wasn't just about romance. It was about rediscovering the joy of connection and realizing he didn't have to carry the weight of someone else's selfishness. Ryan smiled, thinking of Sophie's laugh and the way she made him feel at ease. Life didn't need to be perfect, but it felt lighter and full of potential. To anyone still struggling in toxic relationships, Ryan would say this: it's not your fault. You deserve better. Sometimes, walking away isn't giving up. It's finding yourself. Have you ever walked away from a toxic relationship and found freedom? Let us know in the comments below.